Well, since the topic has been on diversity, and that's what the topic is today, on building shareholder value through global growth and engaging Asian and Asian American talent, I'd like to talk about what diversity is. We use the word diversity a lot, right? And in some sectors, some groups, diversity almost have a negative connotation. And so I started reflecting on what I thought diversity means, at least to me. And I'd like you guys to all think about what diversity means to you, because that's at least the crux of the conversation. For diversity for me, a lot of people say, well, diversity, isn't that quotas? No. For me, that is clearly not quotas, right? Diversity to me means diversity of thought and inclusion of people. Diversity of thought, not necessarily diversity of people, diversity of thought and inclusion of people, which means you want to bring people with different ideas, and I think as Nusrat says, different perceptions of what's going on into the conversation. So that's why it's diversity of thought. But it's also, you can do this too if you want. But it's also inclusion of people, meaning if someone brings something to the table that's a value add, you cannot exclude that person from the conversation, that everybody should be welcome. Now, for example, I'll take the NBA. We're in the NBA finals, right? I wouldn't say the NBA is very diverse, but there's not a lot of Asian Americans in the NBA, maybe one, right, or two. But that's okay, I think, right? As long as if they have the talent to play in the NBA, you're going to include them. Jeremy Lin, the famous Jeremy Lin. If you don't exclude him, I think it's okay. But you don't need to have a certain percentage of people that are Asian Americans playing in the NBA if they're not good enough, right? So I really think the culture should be diversity of thought and inclusion of people. But I would love to get your thoughts, and I'd like to start and get both of your thoughts. So I'd like to start with you, Tina. What does diversity mean to you? And have you have a different reflection on what that definition should be?
I think you're right. I think, to me, diversity is the counterpoint, if you will, to majority. So it is about being different, and it's certainly not so narrow to say that it's about race, or it's about where you're from, or it's male and female, or sexual orientation. It is really about the difference, and sort of, to your point, is including people so that we are celebrating difference, so that whether it's in the boardroom or whether it's in a corporate environment, that we are representing the world sort of around us.
Do you think people understand what diversity means, or do you think there's a group of people that are in the majority like, oh, diversity, that's just another exercise of getting more minorities or people that are different into, the organization, and we're meritocracy, and there shouldn't be an issue about that?
I think that it depends on who is translating the message and how it's being translated. Okay. So I think broad strokes, I think people generally do understand what diversity is about and why diversity is so important to corporations. I think where you see the tactics come in, and absent context, when you're told you have a quota or you have to hire X percent, so it's really all in the delivery and the translation, I believe. But I think that we've seen an evolution over the last many years where there's broad understanding about what diversity really is and what the benefits are.
Great, great. I'm going to go to you, Chris, now. And obviously your experience, has been mostly overseas in Asia. What does diversity mean to you? I mean, in Asia, in China, they're mainly Chinese, right? There's not a lot of diversity, I would say, in China.
There's a Korean working in China.
Right, exactly. That's right. So what does diversity mean? When someone says, hey, we want to bring diversity to our company, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, to us, I think diversity, the definition of diversity changes when you ask someone like me working in China, Korea, or Japan, because we don't necessarily, fortunately or unfortunately, we don't really have a diversified cultural melting pot like the one that you have in New York City. When you say diversity in China, that actually meant more like a man and woman, yeah? Because we don't really have that many Caucasians, and that it's very rare for any Caucasian, who can actually speak good enough Chinese to work there, except one or two, because there are always exceptions. And it's more about men and women gender equality, or working for multinational companies in China. In healthcare industry, we have some 60 multinational companies like us, and Pfizer's and J&J's and all that. And then in my last count, still about 45 out of 60 top multinational companies China country head are non-Chinese. Yeah? We like to improve that ratio to have more Chinese there, so we have a little bit of a diversity from the one that you have in the US. So it is a little bit different. And also same is true for China, Japan and Korea, because I lived there and I went to school in both countries. Those countries don't have immigration offices. You cannot immigrate unless you married somebody there. It's nearly impossible. Only exception to become a naturalized Korean or Japanese is if you have the Olympic quality sporting abilities right before the Olympics. That's the only exception. Other than that, you have to marry to Japanese or Korean. So they're also similar to what I see in China. So it's a different diversities in terms of definition.
Right. So you talked about something that's very interesting, right? You said that from hiring people, leadership in Asia, a lot of times they prefer local Asians to be hired rather than bringing in an Asian American who may not speak the language that well.
Right.
And you even said it might be better if you bring in expat to bring someone that's not an Asian who doesn't speak any Chinese or Korean or Japanese.
Right.
Because they're kind of in between, and there's a perception that they actually are part of the culture when they're not, and think they may know more than.
Right.
So the challenge is, as Asian Americans then, and is there kind of like they don't belong anywhere? Asian Americans, are viewed in Asia as kind of foreigners who aren't very helpful, but possibly also in the U.S. are viewed as Asians. Is that a challenge you see going on?
No, yes and no. It is like if you bring a person who again has a Chinese background, Asian Chinese, American-born Chinese, they call it ABC. They have half of the understanding of the market, but to non-Chinese eyes, they understand everything. So because with the inadequate understanding of the cultural background, they tend to give a wrong interpretation of what is going on. But at the same time, I consider myself as a complete Asian. I'm not an Asian American because I'm just Korean. But we have a lady in the U.S., the golf player called Michelle Lee.
Yeah.
She's actually from Korea because her parents are Korean. But is she really Korean? She's not. She's an American. Although when she goes to Korea, she pretends to be a Korean. Yeah? And I saw her doing an interview claiming that she speaks Korean. But when she comes to Korea, people make nothing against her because I think she's a wonderful player. But in Korea, she make fun of her, speaking broken Koreans. You know what I mean? So for her, she's I think more like an American. Yeah?
Right.
So that there's a difference, yeah,
Right.
in terms of perceptions. Yeah?
So I'm gonna ask. So I talk to a lot of corporations, and corporations always says, well, you know what? Our company is a meritocracy, right? And I have never heard one company yet that I've spoken to that said their company is not a meritocracy. So I challenge, and I'm gonna be the devil's advocate here. If every company is a meritocracy, why do even we need to have diversity managers? Why do we need to have a diversity leadership forum? Why do we even talk about diversity if every company is a meritocracy? So either every company is not a meritocracy, or diversity is not needed. I mean, I'm missing the two. Tina, can you help me with that, bridge that gap?
Sure. I think that, in order to accelerate the promotion of diverse candidates into corporate America, you do need to have some form of formal management around it. Left to its own devices, not that it would never happen, it would just take a longer time.
But why? So, if we have the meritocracy and the best people, I'm being devil's advocate now.
Right.
If we have the best people in the corporation, why do you need to accelerate Asian Americans into executive roles? What's the benefit? If it's a meritocracy already, so that the best Asian Americans are moving to the top anyway.
Because I think we want to promote, well, not everybody. You asked the question prior, and you said, does everybody understand diversity, and does everybody understand the value of diversity? And in our happy times, we'd like to think so, right? The reality is, it's probably somewhere in between, and probably differs from company to company. And even within a company, there are probably pockets of people that have different types of thinking. So in order to, again, to level set and to have a level playing field, particularly when you understand the importance of it, I think it's necessary.
Okay, so that's good. That's good. What are your thoughts? I mean, from a global perspective, is diversity something that Fortune 500 or U.S. companies are pushing to an area that, from a global point of view, it's really much more about, we really want local leaders here in order, rather than bringing diverse people from all over the world to be a leader in these countries in Asia?
Yeah, I personally believe that to be a diversified company, it is not about being American, Chinese, or Japanese. It is about someone with a more diversified background, understanding of the world affairs on an equal basis, not just about US-centric or Asia-centric. But if I may say 5 more seconds of promoting my company. My company, I think we have probably we are probably one of the most diversified company, because a person at the top is an Asian born and raised person managing a global company. Although our company history says that some 70 years ago, company was born by 2 engineers, Minnesota-based engineers, college dropout. It sounds all similar, right? College dropout, invented this, the world's first pacemaker out of garage. Hard to believe. He retired in Hawaii. He's at age 91. But our global CEO is an Asian born and raised. And then 5 out of top 15 executives out of 50,000 employees are all Asian born and raised people. But I think to be globally competitive, because US in the past, in our industry, some 10, 20 years ago, US used to be responsible for 50% of the global share in terms of dollar value. Today, only about 20%. China is about 10%. I was told that in the next 5 to 10 years, China will surpass the US in terms of the market dollar value. That does not mean that you need to have all of a sudden Chinese people to manage the global business. But you need to balance that. Even in our company, although I'm proud to say that we are one of the better diversity companies, and you have probably noticed, although I can behave and act like I'm a Chinese person, but among the 17 execs in our company, we do not have a single Chinese person. Yeah. So we're trying to bring more diversified background. Again, not about the Chinese, not about the American, but
right.
Person with a broader understanding of what is going on.
No, that's good.
That's a good diversity.
That's good. Well, your CEO, Omar Ishrak, I know pretty well. He was a leader of the GE Asian American Leadership Forum. He was very active in diversity, and my colleagues at GE also knew him very well. And someone asked a question before, which in the beginning, which is about how do we bring more Asian Americans to the executive rank? And when I think about a lot of the leaders who are diverse, who are CEOs of the company, whether they're women or they're minority, I see a lot more diverse leaders in the ranks. So as part of the solution of really accelerating diversity and bringing the best talent, whether they're Asian Americans or women or minorities or sex or gender and preference, is the best way to do it is to really try to find a way to bring more diverse leaders into the corporate boardroom and the CEO role. Do you think that would make a difference and accelerate?
I think it does make a difference. I think that we're just more aware. Rather than it being something that's programmatic, it is something that is it's sort of a grassroots effort, right? So we tend to be much more aware. And even when I think about my immediate team, I'm struggling to think if I probably have 1 or 2 Americans on my immediate team, and it happens that way because we are looking for much broader thinking and are probably just sort of more inclusive.
No, so that's great. So that is our goal, that us as Asian society should try to help bring more Asian Americans to the executive rank and Asian talent to the executive rank. We got to build that shareholder case, which is what this conference is all about. If I'm on the board, I'm like, well, why would I want to do that, just for the sake of doing that? I don't want to do anything just for the sake of doing it. I want to do it because it helps my company. It helps, bring more value to this corporation. So how do we as a group explain why having more Asian and Asian Americans in the executive rank is going to add more shareholder value and be a positive impact for corporations? So with you, and then come back to you on that.
Well, I don't really have an academic answer, but next time if you allow me to speak for 2 hours, I'll give you some more good examples. But I do believe, again, I think it is more about bringing somebody, not just having a specific quota of percentage Asians, American, and Latinos, but it's more about the people who have a diversified background, not only focusing on one geographic location, but throughout the world.
So you think that what I had mentioned, diversity of thought is the key.
Yes.
Diversity of thought and inclusion of people. Not to exclude people, but it's really the diversity of thought and experiences.
It should never be about the ratio.
Right. Okay, good. What's your thoughts on how do we?
I agree with everything that you're saying, everything that both you guys are saying. I think for our business in particular, most of our growth, frankly, today is in Asia. So it's China and it is India.
Right.
And so it's not a hard conversation to have to say, hey, we should have more Asians represented at senior levels, because the reality is we don't know. Americans don't know intuitively about how to create experiences that resonate for Asians or Indians or any of those countries. And so having that intellectual capital is really helpful.
So that's great. So basically what you're saying, I think Nusrat touched on it, is if we can have more global experiences and more knowledge and more breadth of what's going on in the world, because we understand Korea or China or Japan and Italy to the extent that we can get opportunities there, and the US, it would just be a natural thing. Wow, this person is global, and this person can help this company go to the next level because our company are becoming, and we're becoming a much more global economy. Is that kind of?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, Tina. Really appreciate your time. And you'll get 2 hours next time. Thank you. Thank you so much.